Archiving started.
In this lecture, everyone, we will be looking at just some of these articles. This will be a brief lecture, excuse me, on the issues in education. So that'll be our first lecture, and the course syllabus goal that aligns with this is to recognize the current issues in mathematics, science, social studies, language arts, health, physical education, and foreign language that affect the selection and use of technology. We will look at just a handful of these topics first, and then we'll come back and re-hit these. And then, so this will be hopefully a 30-minute lecture in which we discuss article after article. You'll notice what I did is I pulled a bunch of research articles from concerning these topics, and what I did with these is then I put them in a PDF where we can scroll down. At the conclusion of these lectures, I always put these PDFs online so that you can look at them as well, and you can read the entire articles at your discretion. Let's look at hiring issues. And hiring issues, they flow through our school systems a lot, and that's one reason that we see a lot of this. So this aligns with our course objective. The first article is by Cesaro and Boone, 2009, and it discusses rural and small school principal candidates, perspective of hiring superintendents. The article is a research article that results from the inquiry into the dynamics of principal selection in rural school districts in 2 mid-American states with high numbers of rural schools. The study focuses on 2 questions. Are rural school districts experiencing a shortage of qualified applicants for vacant principal positions, and what professional and personal characteristics do superintendents seek in selecting principals for rural schools? Very interesting article because it discusses when you're looking at rural and country schools, are there enough candidates who are qualified to work there, as well as what are the superintendents looking for? You notice the introduction. You can read that at your own discretion, and the review of lit discusses how other researchers have examined this. One big area that you'll see is the principal application pool. And this kind of stands out whenever I examine this article, that the teachers make up the largest pool of potential principal applicants and understand the reasons why teachers do or do not apply for vacant principals. In a previous research study, COMEX surveyed Louisiana teachers who held principals' credentials to determine their attitudes towards pursuing an administrative position. Their findings indicate that 80% of teachers who already held an administrative certificate were not interested in becoming a principal. Respondents identified the following as reasons for not pursuing an administrative career: the increasing complexity and constraints of the principal's job, excessive stress with the job, a perceived lack of support for doing a good job, inadequate salaries, long hours, and requirements for the job, and the impact of the job on the principal's family life. So what that says is that a previous research article, which was a very good research article, examined Louisiana teachers who had already certificate of administration, and they said, okay, do you want to become a principal? And 80% of all teachers in Louisiana, the ones they surveyed, who had credentials to be an administrator, said, we don't want to do that. And they asked them why, and they said, look, stress, money, it's just not worth it. So that's a very interesting finding. And whenever you read these research articles, that is the heart of the review of lit. What the author is trying to do is show you where his research, or for example, this research of rural school principals, fits into a larger pattern of research. And that's why you do a review of lit. So they continue discussing other surveys. And you'll see right here, this one here, Winter, Reinhardt, and Moss surveyed teachers holding principal certificates in large Midwestern school districts, including the survey with current assistant principals. They surveyed only currently serving assistant principals who held positive attitudes towards the principal's job. That's interesting. So they actually looked around and examined large school districts, not rural school districts, and only the assistant principals thought the jobs were great, but the regular teachers did not. Interesting. So you now see that there's a gap in the research, and I talked to principals in Louisiana, teachers in Louisiana. They talked to assistant principals as well as regular teachers in large Midwestern schools. So now we're wanting to look at the rural school districts. And the review of it continues. The Nebraska perspective, it says Nebraska has long been considered one of the states with a shortage of principal candidates. According to a report completed by Wendell in 1994, a sizable portion of Nebraska school districts is speculated to reach retirement age within the next 5 to 10 years. Furthermore, in the 1993 Nebraska State Legislative Session, Legislative Bill 292 was passed, establishing the rule of 90 that impacted the retirement system. The law stated that when a person reaches the age of 60 and their age and number of years of experience within the retirement system equal 90, then those persons may retire with full benefits. So Nebraska actually started trying to limit people from retiring. Now, so the review of lit has concluded. You're looking at around 3 to 4 pages of double space or single space 2 column. So in a regular paper, this is a pretty good review of lit. If you're just typing in a double space. So you're looking at like a 10, 12-page paper. So they did a real good job. And as you read this, you'll notice that they did a real good job. They hit a lot of these other studies that have covered principalships. So read this on your own time and see where they went with this. Pretty good. Now, as for this research article, they then go into their next section, which is the research procedures. So they start saying, okay, this is the review of lit. Now we need to do the research, and this is how we did our study. They said this is a qualitative inquiry into the dynamics of principal selection. Now, if you'll recall from any research class you've taken, qualitative means interviews, quantitative means numbers, statistics, surveys. So this is more of an interview system. Interviews with superintendents of participating school districts were conducted in person or via the telephone when distance prohibited face-to-face. So they went out and did a qualitative study in which they interviewed principals. They also interviewed 43 superintendents, 23 in Nebraska and 20 in Texas, and they were interviewed for the study. Our goals were to learn if rural school districts in these states were experiencing a shortage of qualified principal candidates. The selection of school districts for this qualitative study was based on 2 criteria. The district had hired at least 1 principal within the previous 3 years, and the district's total enrollment was no more than 1,600 students. So that's obvious right there, that they limited their criteria to less than 600 because that's how they defined a rural school. What professional qualifications do superintendents look for in principal applicants? In Nebraska, candidates were expected to hold an endorsement first as teacher and a second endorsement as principal for the grade level appropriate to the position he or she is seeking. For example, an elementary principal should be endorsed certified for grades pre-K 6 and secondary principal for grades 7 through 12. Texas superintendents also wanted principal candidates to have completed a principal preparation program and to hold the appropriate certification. Nebraska superintendents ranked knowledge of curriculum and assessment as well as rich teaching experiences as essential for principal candidates. They too preferred candidates who had leadership experiences outside of the classroom, worked on school improvement teams, or leading. So now the point of this whole finding right here, as you read this article, is it starts opening up the curtain and you start seeing what is behind what everyone expected. So this is a really interesting article because it's showing us what the superintendents wanted when they hired the principals. As we scroll down, we see that some superintendents said they were seeking principals who have the following attributes. And look at these, the one with the bulletins. Academic focus, experience evaluating teachers, a proven motivator of others, skill and knowledge in helping teachers, knowledge of both state and federal standards, a clear vision of teaching and learning. So these are this is one of the heart of the study right here. Texas superintendents favored principal candidates who were experienced with the state's high state accountability system. Principals were expected to know how to work with teachers to raise achievement test scores. So that was a very interesting find because you notice that they wanted Texas superintendents. They're like, well, we understand the need for all of these characteristics here, but we want someone who's going to get ready for high-stakes testing. So there's a study within its own self that Texas superintendents actually were shifting their focus to more of the No Child Left Behind requirements. Very interesting. What personal qualities do superintendents seek in candidates? Superintendents appreciate candidates who interviewed well. There's one of the key things. Applicants who presented themselves as capable of operating the school without close supervision by the superintendent or attractive candidates. So superintendents did not want to micromanage. They wanted to be able to promote that principal as a well manager, someone who can work very hard. The ability to work cooperatively with teachers and parents is a valued attribute as in the applicant's potential to work as a part of the administrative team. In describing their questions for the principal, most superintendents expressed their preference for the roles of the colleague and the mentor. So the superintendent kind of wanted the principal to be a colleague and a mentor, someone who can work well with his staff and help them, but also, in a bigger part, also be the kind of person who can help guide his teachers to higher levels. During the actual interview process, during the process, superintendents tried to learn about individual personal goals and how those might be reflected in the school. Self-assurance, high expectations for yourself and others were highly regarded qualities. Applicants who were organized and possessed skills that complemented those of the superintendents were regarded as strong candidates. Record of success, positive references. So, you see this and you go, okay, that's what they always expect from everyone. But when you walk in and you're confident, you have high expectations, we're going to do well, and I'm going to do well, and I'm going to work hard, and if I don't do well, I failed. So that's what they were looking for, is someone, a motivator. And however, honesty, integrity, and moral values were high on the list. And you'll see this later on. You'll see this later on whenever we look at how a school district, the Atlanta School District, just fell apart because they did not have honesty, integrity, and moral. What were superintendent's expectations for principal leadership? And this gives you some guides right here as too. Success in building and maintaining good relations with the board, ability to relate well with staff, students, and parents, and the ability to exercise sound judgment. What other qualities are important for rural principals? Superintendents believe that there are definite qualities of characteristics that are important for principals in rural districts. So now we need to look at what did they think were important for country or rural principals. In short, principals of rural schools had to be flexible and versatile. Principals were expected to perform routine administrative tasks competently, but also to lend a hand in supervising the playground, manage the Title I program, drive the school bus, work well. So superintendents whenever they wanted a principal for a country school, they wanted all of those other characteristics that they wanted from the other principals. But when you looked at a rural school, they wanted more as well. You had to work well with others. You had to multitask. You had to also drive a bus. You had to do this. So, a rural principal, they were expected to do more. As one Texas superintendent put it, rural principals will have to do things that aren't in the principal's job description. Cut the lawns, plant flowers, help with the district banquet, help out with graduation, all in the same day. Interruptions happen throughout the day, and candidates need to know how to juggle many different tasks. So, when you started this article, you probably thought, what does this mean? Now you're seeing that there are more expectations for smaller school principals in this survey of Texas and Nebraska principals. So superintendents expect more from a country principal. Very interesting. Understanding of the political culture of the rural school and community is very important. Everything that occurs in a rural school is accessible to the community, and news travels quickly. So the principal also needs to be able to understand that the social context of the school district they will be teaching in. The coffee drinkers at the local cafe may have learned of school problems even before students are dismissed for the day. And that's something that the principal is going to have trouble with as well. Understanding the social delicacies, we'll say, of a small rural town. So let's go real world on this one. Some schools in Mississippi, football is life. Football is the world. And those coffee drinkers at that local store or wherever, well, let's be really real if we want to do that. In Mississippi, where are the coffee drinkers hanging out now? They're hanging at McDonald's. You go to McDonald's at 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning, and you'll see the older generation that used to be at the country store now at McDonald's drinking their coffee. That's the new place, and that's what McDonald's is trying to do. So if you're in that small rural town and you've got a McDonald's, that's where your coffee drinkers are going to be. And they're going to know stuff about that football team, about who got expelled, their girlfriends, all that stuff. And a principal is going to have to understand the social delicacies of navigating that landmine. Well, you say, well, what does that mean? The superintendent is wanting someone, according to this study, that he can unleash, that he can let go, that will not have to be micromanaged, but also will have to do all these other things. So there's a lot of pitfalls that a principal of a small country school can go through. You're going to have people walk in and do all and have major interruptions. So it's going to be a very demanding job, more demanding than a large city school. The majority of superintendents in both states stress the importance of the principal's commitment to the community. This translates into the expectation that the principal and his or her family reside, contribute to its life as a member of the local service group, maintain a local church membership, and take part in community celebrations. So, being a principal in a small rural school, according to the superintendents in Nebraska and Texas, is a life-changing, family-changing, and sometimes religious-changing experience. And I say religious-changing experience because if you're not always going to church and you become a principal, they're going to expect you to have a religious commitment. They're not expecting you to be Southern Baptist. They're expecting you to go to church. Now, therein lies some of the big problems. Let's say if the entire population is Methodist in that community and you're not, that could be a problem there. But they cannot hire people, based on religion. That is true, but you're going to have friction, according to these superintendents, in the community if you're not part of the community. So being a rural principal is definitely harder than being an urban principal. Superintendents of rural school districts in Nebraska and Texas report no shortage of qualified candidates, no shortage for principal positions, nor do the superintendents interviewed exhibit undue concern about being able to draw from the applicant pool. This is consistent with the current research literature of the supply of and demand for principals. We also found that applicants for rural principal positions tended to be aspiring and beginning administrators looking for their first position as a principal. Superintendents reported that they looked for specific professional and personal qualities in principal applicants. They included qualities reported elsewhere in the literature. So, rural superintendents place great value on the ability of potential principals to fit into the political and social context of the local community. So even though there is a high demand being placed on these future and potential candidates, there isn't a shortage for this. And then they say, well, why is there not a shortage? One thing could be pay. And another thing could be that teaching is so hard that people want to become administrators. But that goes outside of this study. But one thing the study does point out is that the majority of candidates for rural schools are aspiring, moving up the ladder young administrators, which kind of goes against what you would expect. A rural school has more demands than an urban school, so you would expect more seasoned ones. So the rural schools get the young ones, even though they have more demand. The research tells us that an individual's decision to seek a principal's position is influenced by the potential applicant's perception of a number of contextual factors. The principal's job is a difficult one, and from the outside, rural school districts may appear to be havens of well-disciplined students, supportive parents, and lower job stress. Those who have lived and worked in rural schools know that the reality is much more complex. Rural principals are often paid less than colleagues in larger schools, work without the support of assistant principals and specialized central office staff, and are frequently isolated from professional colleagues. Rural communities can also suffer from poverty, underemployment, and most of the same social problems that are found in urban centers. Nonetheless, the favorable perception of life in a rural community appeals to many potential principal applicants. Superintendents use the popular image of life in a rural community in attracting principal candidates by emphasizing quality of life issues to attract quality principals. So there is your big conclusion. How, if rural school districts are so harder to teach at, then how are they drawing the applicants? And there it is, the Mayberry syndrome. By saying that rural schools and the community is such a good place to live and there's no crime and this is a nice little suburb, won't you come work here? That's the one thing that the rural school districts have going for them, is the desire to bring in, this Mayberry type life. Hey, honey, where do you want to live? Oh, let's live in inner city Jackson. No. Hey, honey, where do you want to live? Let's live in Scuba. What's in Scuba? It's a good town to live in. It's a country living. The land value's not that high. We can build us a nice little house. We'll be the principal of the school district. They got a nice church on there. And it's a good place for me to start my job. After 2 years, after 3 years, the stress of the job's killing them. So then they go somewhere else. So it's a image that the superintendents and the principals have. That a rural school is more down home, more country, more fun to work at. But we see the expectations of the superintendent are more and also more difficult. So therefore, many principals at rural school districts probably do not last long. And that's the next difficulty. The conclusion of the study suggests that superintendents of rural school districts in at least 2 states with a high percentage of rural school districts are not facing a shortage of applicants. Nor did superintendents interviewed express undue anxiety about their ability to find. So job is not a problem. Finding people is not a problem. Like their counterparts in large urban and suburban school districts, rural superintendents expect principal applicants to have completed an appropriate principal prep program. So they have the basic, we've talked about this, the basic expectations. They value leadership skills, but rural superintendents also expect principal applicants to possess specific attributes. So they expect more from them. The popular stereotype of the pastoral rural community attracts many applicants to positions in rural schools, and superintendents are not averse to using the image to offset some of the disadvantages of working in a rural school district. For the right candidate, a rural principal position offer an opportunity to contribute in visible ways to the life of a rural community and can be rewarding professional and personal experience. All right, so what we've done in this little lecture, this small lecture, is we've examined this article. It was written in 2009. It examined rural school districts, and it looked at how they are perceived by the superintendents. So you read these articles and you think, well, it's just reading is so amazing. So I'm just going to go on and spill about this one. This is a research article by Patricia and Mike, who from Texas and University of Nebraska. So these are 2 researchers. And what they decided, and they probably spent 6 months on this. They worked very hard on this. And then within a 20-minute lecture, we've examined this article, and we have come from this. We've brought from this the perception of superintendents in rural schools on their principals. Kind of a very amazing thing. Here's what I want you to do. On a Word document, you will need to answer the following question. And I'm making this up as we go, so let's make sure we understand this. How difficult is it for a first-year teacher to have a first-year rural superintendent? There you go. How difficult is it for a first-year teacher to have a first-year rural superintendent who also has to hire a new principal for your school district? So this is your first year as teaching. Imagine this. This is your first year as teaching, and you're in a rural school. How difficult? What are some difficulties that would come into play? That's what I'm looking for, is put yourself in the mindset of a first-year, fresh out of college teacher in a rural school, in Nebraska, Texas, it doesn't matter. And they've got a brand new superintendent who just got elected, and he has just hired a we'll say a teacher who's been teaching for 10 years or whatever, and this is their first job as a principal. Because as we saw in the article, that the majority of principals in a rural school district were aspiring and new moving up. What are some difficulties? What are you going to see? Now, we know it's going to be difficult, obviously. But what are some difficulties that that first-year teacher is going to have to endure? Look, and how can you answer this question based on this article? Look at the review of lit. Look at how the expectations, the perspective, or how the superintendents view what they wanted from the principal. So it's a very simple article. How long should it be? As long as it needs to be. Should I cite anything? No, don't cite anything. Just write and make sure it's well written. So how do you do that? All right, well, here's what you do. I'm going to walk you through the steps. First step is you want to open up a Microsoft Word document, and then you're going to type your answer into that Microsoft Word document. Very simple to do. So you type your answer, and you do that, and you save it. And then after you save it, you go to your assignment. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kill that one. You go into your assignment, and let's go ahead and create a title for this. We can make this due date. It is the 19th of August. So, now, if you're listening to this lecture on another semester, then the dates will be different, but that's fine. But what you'll see is it'll be right there, first year teaching paper, and you'll need to click that, and then you're going to add the attachment as I've instructed on the other video, and you would just add that attachment, and then you make sure you click submit. Very simple project to do. So as a first year teacher, what are some difficulties that you're going to have to endure as described in that scenario? How are you going to, how's the principal going to handle things? Is he going to be overworked? I don't want to give away everything, but think about what's going to happen to the first year teacher. I'm going to also put this article on the front page. So I'll do that right now so you can see where it's going to be. And that'll be on the front page as well. So whenever you go to the course content page, you will notice that this PDF of multiple lectures is there, and that's the one that I was teaching. So you can go back and read that at your own leisure. That's now loading, as you'll see. So as a student, when you go to the course content page, you'll see the SDLC 1925. You click on that. That'll be a PDF file that will open up for you, and you can be able to see all that. And you'll see, you can scroll down, and then you can read the article. We'll also follow this other lectures, which will discuss the other articles in here. So the first article is right here, very simple to do. You can save it, you can print it, you can do whatever you want to. You can to make it easier, we can go ahead and rename that. first lecture, and that'll be right there waiting for you. So hopefully you learned something from this, and this is a very simple project, so make sure if you have any questions, send me an email. You can send me an email through here, or you can send me an email through the email address I have right here. Thank you for listening.